We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay Patterson, Mike Santagata here. Mike, how are you?
I feel like I've finally recovered from being sick for like the past 2.5 weeks. So
Sheesh.
feeling pretty good. What a terrible
Fantastic.
decision to go to the Bengals Steelers game. It'd be so long.
You know what? You saw a win, and it was the last game of the season. You took one for the team. Now you're feeling better. There's football news all around as the playoffs continue in the NFL. But for the Cincinnati Bengals, we'll go ahead and get to it. Some of the headlines: Lou Anarumo taking the Colts job. Let's talk about that first, and then we'll get into all the Bengals news and moves and official announcements when it comes to the new coaching staff right now. Lou Anarumo, Colts, good fit for him.
It's interesting. I think he's very different from Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley, who was their last defensive coordinator, very into what would be called attack react defense, just penetrating as a defensive line to get upfield and stopping the run on your way to rush the passer. And Lou is the complete opposite of that when it comes to how his front plays. He wants to stop the run first and foremost, play slow, react attack would be what it would be called, where you're going to read the block, defeat the block, and then get to the running back and then read it out. And if they're passing, then you try to beat the block and get to the passer. So I think that's a bit different just in terms of stylistically. They're very different in their fronts. I think on the back end, pretty different too, because Gus, at least he always has in the past, loved cover three. Loves playing cover three behind this. It makes sense. You're gapped out so you can shoot up the field. He was part of the Seattle Seahawks cover three tree. So he got his start before going to Jacksonville. And Lou, to me, not a cover three specialist. I think he did it a bit when Bates was here, and everybody's going to play the coverage. It's probably the most called coverage in the NFL. But I don't think he majored in it the same way Bradley does. Like to me, Lou's favorite coverage is probably a Tampa 2 variation, um, because he likes being able to play over the top and keep everything in front of him in the pass game, be able to make plays on the ball when it gets overthrown or anything. So that's different too. So it's almost getting like the stylistic complete opposite from your past defensive coordinator. We look at the roster. I think the best fit for that is Kenny Moore, just having a slot corner that can blitz, play man, play zone, do whatever. That's his Mike Hilton. You're going to try to use that guy every way you can. I think we look at everybody else, though. They have great defensive tackles. Those defensive tackles, DeForest Buckner's always been a shoot off the ball, penetrate type of defensive tackle, from what I can remember. So it'd be interesting to see him in the other style of defense. They do have a nose in Grover Stewart that can handle a bit of the DJ Reader role. So I think that's a good fit. Overall, I'm mixed on the fit just because it's so different from what they had. They're probably going to need to make some changes. But at the end of the day, I think Lou's a good defensive coordinator. I'm
Mhm.
given some trust in this, that the Colts believe in it and that they'll get some more guys that are going to fit his scheme maybe a little bit better. So I think it's an all right fit. I'm glad that Lou was able to find a job so quickly. I think we both knew he was probably going to be in demand. I mean, 2 years ago, we were talking about him as one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. He didn't suddenly, from 2 bad years, become some bum. Like, I get the results weren't good, but to me, it's been the players. And yeah, he didn't develop those guys, but I always feel like development comes from your assistant coaches. So it almost feels like he got kind of screwed over by the assistant coaches, by the front office, by not getting him keeping the players that he wanted to keep. That doesn't, he's not absolved of guilt here. He should have been able to recognize some of the other things, playing guys that deserve to play, young guys instead of the old vets. And I think his message didn't connect with the younger guys as well as it used to. So I think there are reasons to move on for the Bengals. But overall, I think he'll be all right in Indianapolis. What I was thinking was that it'd be a team that was more ready to compete. I don't think the Colts are ready to compete next year unless Anthony Richardson takes a big step, because what you hire Lou for is really to, put the best quarterbacks in the league in a bind. And you're in a division where CJ Stroud's good. But other than that, your next best is probably Trevor Lawrence, and then whatever the Titans are doing. So it's not a division that really needs that. Like, that's why I thought AFC West for him when you're talking about like Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. But we'll see. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on the Anarumo to Indianapolis news?
Yeah, I mean, not surprised. I think the news that was pretty telling, obviously, in high demand for him, he was going to be, well, according to Diana Rossini, who is definitely in the know, one of the top insiders. She works over at The Athletic. She had mentioned that Ben Johnson was actually considering Lou Anarumo for his defensive coordinator. And I think that's pretty telling, if he was going to go to Chicago, because obviously the Ben Johnson hire is absolutely huge. And Ben, as a head coach, wanted to bring in an experienced guy like Lou Anarumo. I know Kenny Moore did tweet last night. He seemed really pumped about it. For me personally, always root for Lou. I hope he sees a lot of success there. I agree with you when it comes to the AFC South and just the Colts competing, because you got to have your quarterback. I mean, you look at the NFL playoffs right now, and I know people feel a certain way towards Jalen Hurts and the cast around him, but he's there for a reason. Jaden Daniels is having a crazy season. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are two of the top quarterbacks in the AFC too. You got to have your franchise guys. So for Lou Anarumo, maybe, they see a little bit of difference on the offensive side of the ball, and they see some success, and they compete a little more with the Houston Texans in the AFC South. But couldn't be happier for him. I'm fine with him going to the Colts. Glad he's not, some assistant to the Kansas City Chiefs or anything like that, or even a team that the Bengals will see often in their own division. So, yeah, I'm fine with it. Good for Lou Anarumo. Not surprised. I see the criticism the Bengals are still getting, and obviously time will tell. We'll get to their defensive coordinator news in just a little bit, or what there is out there as of now. But it was two sides that needed to move on. We've talked about that plenty. I saw a clip from Travis Kelce's podcast, and he was kind of criticizing the move. But look, it was just two people that needed to move on. The Cincinnati Bengals and Lou Anarumo, but wish him all the best. Now we get a little Bengals news this week. A couple things, actually. We'll get to Cam Grandy in just a moment, the extension everybody was waiting for. But when it comes to coaching news, one of the things the Bengals are good at is kind of keeping things on the DL. Obviously, the offensive line interviews are probably not one of the most popular things you hear about on the internet, but Scott Peters, a guy who's been under Bill Callahan for quite some time, he's obviously coming from the Patriots staff. The Bengals think the world of him, and according to Paul Dehner, they were considering bringing him in last year, and they were more than likely going to be moving on from Frank Pollock. And the excitement for Scott Peters, I'll tell you right now, I think a lot of people at first were like, what? Who's going to be? Is this a good hire? And then you look over on social media and you see some of the talented offensive linemen or people in the O-line business just say it was a great hire for the Cincinnati Bengals. And one of the biggest things I think you need as an offensive line coach is development. No more glass eaters. You need someone in here who can really get these guys ready, because this team will more than likely have a few new pieces on their offensive line in 2025. But what did you think about the news when you heard it?
I love Scott Peters. Now, part of it is he has a lot of stuff online that you can listen to, read, watch. I think watch is a big one. He runs the Tip of the Spear company. He has an old YouTube from 10 years ago where he's talking about some of his offensive line techniques. He played in the league. The weird jiu-jitsu Chuck Lesnar training background, or Brock Lesnar. So I really like when I listen to the guy, though. And guys smarter than me about offensive line play, like Brandon Thorne, and then you look at some guys that are really smart offensive line play, like Jim McNally, and they're saying this is the next big thing. He's the next big thing. And I understand him working in New England. We'll get into that. But I think when you're looking at him, he's different. And I think he's a good fit for the Bengals offense, not because of the run game stuff, but because to me, whenever I've listened to him and watched him and everything, he seems like a scientist at the forefront of individual pass protection. That's how I would describe it, where he has like this long system for the strikes, the sets, and everything that the offensive lineman is going to do. Whether they're going to set on a 30-degree angle, use an inside pillar strike along with an outside clamp or something like that. Like you'll call that, I can't remember, a 2AS or something like that. And it's just this long system of different numbers and letters. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It was above my intelligence level, I think, for some of it. But like the different strikes, it's not just about like hit the guy. It's like, where am I going to put my hand, each hand individually? Big believer in individual hand usage, which is pretty necessary in this year. but like, where does each hand specifically go? It's not just as simple as I'm just going to, punch with my hands and then grab on. Like, each hand has a specific spot it's supposed to go. Your set has to match that with what angle you're taking out of your stance. It's really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at some of this other stuff, it's like, how do I beat different things the defense throws? Because defensive linemen are all using the same moves. So when they're bull rushing and their hands are low, they're getting low and they're winning with leverage. He had a way to beat that called the cuff technique 10 years ago, where he's going to clap the wrists together and make them fall over. When it comes to the long arm, he uses this corkscrew technique where you're going to take your arm and then corkscrew around underneath to gain leverage, break their angle, and be able to get inside of them. So like, there's all this cool stuff that's about individual pass protection. I think that's so cool. Granted, I don't know, maybe other guys are out there with like these similar systems and everything that they're doing. But what it sounds like when Jim McNally and just people who are really in the know about offensive line play talk about him, they talk about him like he's a scientist. Like that's why my feel is that he is like at the forefront of modern techniques for pass protection for individuals. It seems like he is very focused on the individual and getting the best out of them with his teaching, rather than a lot of offensive line coaches. You'll see it when they do a clinic, when they talk, it's about the unit. It's about, we're going to do this run scheme. We're going to do it the best. I think of wide zone guys, and Scott Peters, I guess technically probably a little bit of a wide zone guy, but he did a lot of gap stuff in Cleveland as well. He's been under Bill Callahan forever. Bill Callahan does everything. So I kind of think of him as a guy that's probably going to do everything. But they'll talk about their wide zone stuff. They're like, yeah, we see the game as one unit, and you want to, of course, you want to see the game as one unit. But like, that is their selling point, is we're going to be athletic, we're going to be aggressive. And they're talking about like as a unit, where it feels like Peters talks about the individuals like, I need high character, smart individuals that can take up my teaching and become the best that they can be. I would give him a lot of credit for what happened with Wyatt Teller's career. I think when you look at how Wyatt Teller came to Cleveland as really a cast-off and then became an all-pro, you give Bill Callahan plenty of credit on there. I think you have to give Peters some credit there too. As the assistant guy, your assistant offensive line coach generally does a lot of the training as well, a lot of the development. A lot of development also happens off the field, off of the practice field, even like off-season stuff. But yeah, I'm enthused about this hire. We'll get into the negatives in a moment, but that was all the positives I can think of. I've been a big fan of his for years, so I thought he was pretty much, when I'm looking at like who could be the next big offensive line coach, like he brings in my mind. He coached under Bill Callahan for a decade, who is probably still the best, maybe second best offensive line coach in the entire NFL, and has been for 2 decades now.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at like some of the stuff, it just seems like his technical prowess is among the best, especially when it comes to pass protection. Pass protection is huge for the Bengals. You're not going to get them to become a team that becomes 50% run, 50% pass. They're always going to pass the ball with Joe Burrow. So you want to have an effective run game, of course. But the most important thing for these offensive linemen is become the best as they possibly can in pass protection. I think he can do that.
All right, let's talk about this, because I think a lot of people were pointing at this. Our friends over at Gridiron Grading even pointed it out. Well, look what he did with the Patriots for 1 year. It was absolutely, nothing to be excited about. What do you say to people who say, do not pay attention to what the Patriots had as offensive linemen last year?
Obviously, you're going to look at that. I think you have to. And this is why I don't think I could give this higher an A+, is just because like you look at what happened with his one stint as an offensive line coach for one season, and Patriots roster wasn't very good. But they didn't get the most. He didn't get the most out of those guys. So I would look at that. And my first thought is who was actually on the field, because when you look at the top 5 guys in games started, you have Mike Onwenu. Obviously, Mike Onwenu is good. We all know him. We wanted him in the free agency cycle last year. He's a good player. Had to play tackle. I personally think he's better at guard, but he has to play tackle for a few reasons. One, they don't have anybody, but 2, he's also getting paid like a tackle. Mm-hmm. The next guy, DeMontre Jacobs, your undrafted free agent from this season. He was the second most games started for that Patriots offensive line. Third, Vadarian Lowe, a 6th rounder from 2023 on the Minnesota Vikings. The Patriots didn't even draft this guy. Next, Layden Robinson, a 4th rounder from 2024. That's That's your second best investment because next is Ben Brown. We know Ben Brown, 2023
Mm-hmm.
undrafted free agent. That's their top 5 in starts. That's brutal. That's
Mm-hmm.
4 guys who are either day 3 picks or mostly undrafted late day 3 guys. Most of these guys were just free agents they picked up off the street. So when you're talking about 3 guys off the street in Jacobs, Lowe, and Brown, and then you have 1 day 3 guy in Robinson, you're not gonna. I don't think anybody can make that work. I don't think that Jeff Stoutland would be able to make that work. And Jeff Stoutland or Bill Callahan himself. And we actually saw it with Bill Callahan when you look at how the right guard, right tackle performed in Tennessee. Offensive line coaches can be great, but at the end of the day, your players are what matters the most. And you can't overcome that big of a deficit in talent. You can't do it. Michael Jordan played a lot of snaps for them before he got cut. I know at PFF, I think he got a 60 grade, which is insane for him. By far the best in his career. Still got cut. He wasn't doing enough for them. So I don't know if the PFF grade 100% matched how he was playing. But when I look at that, I just think like that is like I agree with people that the Bengals guard issue was bad.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the Bengals talent, you look at Orlando Brown, Pro Bowler, Amarius Mims, to me, has the talent to be a future All-Pro, future Pro Bowler, but at the very least, solid player right now.
Mm-hmm.
And very talented first-round pick. To me, both those guys probably as good, better than Onwenu. And definitely, you're talking about your second best offensive lineman, Cincinnati, is by far better than anybody they had in the top 5 starting unit for Patriots. Ted Karras, I think, also better than those guys. And then you talk about Alex Kappa and Cordell Volson. That's probably in the same territory as those 4 players. Could you imagine having 4 Alex Kappas and Cordell Volsons on the offensive line and then blaming the offensive line coach? I don't think I could. I just, at some point, it's the talent. Like, I don't know if people think that offensive line coaches are like miracle workers. Like, oh, you could give this guy me and my 4 friends, and we would be, blowing open holes and never giving up sacks. Like, that doesn't work. That you need talent. At the end of the day, you need talent. To me, players, more important. The most important thing you can find are players. So the Bengals need to go out there and find players, because I think the worst thing they could do is just go like, this new guy will fix Volson and Kappa and Ford. Like, we'll just have a competition between those 3. Like, that's a terrible plan.
No.
But so to me, spend a top 100 pick on a guard. Go and buy another guard in free agency. And then that is your plan. And then you have Volson as your guy off the bench, Ford as a guy off the bench. Like, that's fine. I would also probably go get a swing tackle of some sort, whether that's a guy Peters loves in the draft or a free agent that maybe he's familiar with. But end of the day, I just don't think they had talent. I think like that is leagues below where the Bengals were in terms of talent. That would be going out there and, like I said, going out there and starting Cordell Volson, Cody Ford, I don't know, Devin Cochran, Alex Kappa, and somebody else. I can't even think of a guy for the Bengals that could be that somebody else. But like those late day 3 guys and undrafted free agents, that is just not a talent level you can work with to me. So I think that's also a negative. Obviously, you didn't get them to play their, max potential and get whatever out of them. But I mostly throw that away. But to me, that also becomes negative. Like, well, I still don't know what he is as an offensive line coach, even after a year. That's where I am. It's like, I don't know what he is, because I just don't think anybody would have succeeded in that Patriots plan there to be using your second biggest draft cap, your second most talented guy as a 4th rounder. I don't think that is a plan that a rookie 4th rounder. I don't think that's a plan you can actually work with. So I think he kind of got screwed. Patriots guys seem to think the same thing. Anybody I've talked to, where it's just like he didn't have talent. And even when Drake May got in there, they were a little bit better as a unit just because he was better at avoiding sacks and avoiding pressure and getting the ball out quicker than Brissett. But I think it's a negative. But to me, it's a negative in terms of I just don't know what he is as the head offensive line coach. I can tell you I loved him as the assistant. So I think you're basically, to me, taking Bill Callahan's best assistant and seeing if it works for you. And I think that's a great plan.
Yeah, and I think, just some other things to note. One of the things that I don't feel like the Cincinnati Bengals front office would do over the last few years, and maybe they changed their ways with Amarius Mims in the first round, but you need to let Scott Peters be involved in this draft when it comes to the players, because I know the front office is going to feel a certain way, but let the guy who's developing these guys choose who he wants as his interior guards, because that's obviously who this team needs to focus on in every round. Honestly, you just need to add not only starting caliber interior offensive line, but as you mentioned, even swing tackle when it comes to the depth position. We saw the injuries this year. I mean, they went from Trent Brown, Amarius had to deal with an injury, Orlando Brown Jr. missed several games. So all of that is extremely important. And yes, I agree with you. You cannot just rely and say, you know what, Scott Peters, we believe in his development. He can develop Kappa and get him back to what he was, his first year here, or even the same thing for Bolsa. No, I don't want anything to do with that. You move on from those guys and you bring in some brand new, and maybe it's young, maybe it's rookies, but let Scott Peters be involved in the draft room. So we'll see what that looks like. But is there anything else you'd like to say about him before we move on to the DC news?
No, but I'll just reiterate, let him be the guy that selects it. To me, I think he should overrule what the front office believes, because the last time the front office overruled the offensive line coach, we got Jackson Carman. I feel like that's a call. It's like, come on, maybe let the offensive line coach pick the guy he loves. Maybe, and I know that they are more involved in Cincinnati than most other places, but from the reports, it sounds like Frank Pollock didn't really want Jackson Carman, but got overruled by, I don't know if it's ownership, front office. I'm going to lump them together. I think front office said they wanted Jackson Carman no matter what, and Frank just said, whatever, I'll work with them. And it obviously didn't work out. I think you have to let the offensive line coach pick the guy he loves, and then he's staking his own job on that guy. I don't want to see them, the front office just goes like, yeah, you didn't really want this guy, but I went and talked to the old offensive line coach and he really likes him. Yeah, because that's apparently what happened. It's like, no, that is not how you should be doing this. Especially when you have a small scouting staff in the first place. Like, overruling a big scouting staff, sure, like half the group is into it, half's not. This one, it's such a small group. It's like you're overruling the only guys. Like, what do you even have those guys for if you're just going to overrule them? So, yeah, I'm in the camp of let Peters pick the guys he likes. And also Michael McCarthy. Don't know anything about him, but new assistant offensive line coach as well.
Yeah, so he brought someone familiar with him, and we'll see what it looks like for them when it comes to their offensive line staff. It's obviously a huge year for them after a pretty down year for the interior side. But we move over to the defensive coordinator side. There are a lot of opinions right now, and obviously nothing is official. What we do know, Patrick Graham. We talked about DeMarcus Covington, 2 of the interviews so far. Do you want to note that Patrick Graham is getting a second interview with Jacksonville? We don't know if there's still in the talks with the Cincinnati Bengals for the defensive coordinator position, because one thing the Cincinnati Bengals are going to do is keep everything on the down low. And if anybody's going to have anything, it's going to be the NFL Network. If you've noticed, they're the ones who get the news out on any Bengals coaching staff news. So that's who you need to pay attention to, Ian Rappaport, and a few of the other guys there. They're the ones that obviously right when the clock struck 0 in the national championship game said that Al Golden would be coming to Cincinnati, going to wrap a few things up as we're recording this on a Tuesday. He's going to interview for the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator job on Wednesday as a top candidate. Obviously, playing in the extended playoffs and getting pushed back a little bit, they couldn't do the formal interview, but I'm sure those conversations have happened plenty. Team is very familiar with Al Golden. I know we talked about it on our last podcast, and I know a lot of Bengals fans are feeling a certain way about the whole defensive coordinator interview position and names that are being thrown out there. Why are they going with someone they're familiar with? You brought it up on the last podcast. Everybody needs to remember what Golden did with the linebacker group. Obviously, it feels like it's aged a little bit since he's been gone, a group that has struggled a lot since he's been gone. It doesn't, say he's going to be this all-star defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, but it really feels like it's going to be official this week that they probably give Al Golden the job. Maybe. Nothing's official until it's over. But what are some of your thoughts on that? And we can get into not really having the national championship game as the one to say, well, that defines if this guy's going to be good or not. But the overall news about Al Golden, the potential defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals.
I think Al Golden is a good coach, and what he did with the Cincinnati linebackers was obviously extremely impressive. And we talk about just Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, but he also, I feel like, took Akeem Davis-Gaither, Marcus Bailey, and all these guys, and were able to turn them into spot starters. Clayton Johnston, and like just these guys that were like, they would come in for a game and you would barely notice. So I think he did an incredible job in Cincinnati, and apparently he's part of the pressure package and third down defense, which I think was better when he was here. So I think the whole defense was better when he was here. So I think he's a great coach, and what he did in Notre Dame, from everything I've seen, was great. I think the one difference is going to be, I can't see him running as much man coverage in the NFL. Nobody does. Just even the highest man coverage guys like Aaron Glenn, they run under 50% man coverage, and Golden, I think, was over that Notre Dame. I think Jim Schwartz is the only guy I can think of in the past 2 years that'll be over 50% man coverage for a season. I just don't see it. You don't have the horses in the NFL. And then second, the rules in the NFL are different. You can be more physical in college than the NFL and not get flagged. There's no illegal contact in college. I don't think I see a defensive holding call in college. You can pass interference, but you can't. But like when the ball is not thrown yet, you're okay to hit guys, reroute them, put your hands on them, be physical. So I think that's the big difference. When you're playing man coverage, that's really important. When you're playing zone coverage, not as important. Like, you want to reroute guys, you want to get in their way, you want to knock them around, you want to throw off the timing. But man coverage is more important to be able to, be able to grab a little bit, to be able to let that go. So I just think the rules are going to change things. What I would expect with Al Golden as defensive coordinator, which is probably what's going to happen, we don't know for sure. But I would expect the same scheme as what Lou ran, but a little bit of tweaks, maybe a little bit more man coverage than Lou. And I think you would maybe see, just little tweaks here and there. I think it'll be the same bones of the defense. I think he's going to try to run the Lou defense, which I think is also why they might like him. But different voice telling these guys things. Like we've talked about, Lou's voice is what grew old, not the defense itself, but just the guys weren't performing. They weren't connecting with his message. He wasn't able to get across what they needed to do to them. I think Golden, the plan is that Golden's going to run the same defense and get better results. Essentially, he's going to run a similar defense, get better results, slight uptick in man coverage, maybe he's not dropping defensive ends into coverage as much or something. But I think you're going to see a similar defense. I don't think you're going to see a crazy defense. I'm not going to run what Notre Dame ran, in my opinion. I mean, we'll see next year, but in my opinion, you won't see what Notre Dame ran, but you will see a little bit differences just in terms of the frequency of things. But the same bones of the defense. I think they're going to play the same type of fronts. They're going to play the same stuff in the back, and they're going to play things the same way. They're going to run the same coverages. That's what I would expect with Golden. And we could talk a bit about the national championship game if you want.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into the national championship game, and I think overall, it's going to be kind of a similar feel as Lou Anarumo. It does scare me a little bit, just because, look, we just watched that. I'm hoping that Al Golden doesn't just put guys on the field because, hey, they've been here, got to keep them on the field. I hope he plays the best players at their position, and maybe that'll be different in a defensive coordinator when it comes to developing these guys outside of the linebacker room. Obviously, you brought up a good point when it comes to assistants and developing these guys. The defensive line coach who he hires and brings in underneath them, that's a huge hire for them. A place where they've struggled. They've spent a lot of money, but they struggled, and that room could look totally different next year depending on what happens with Trey Hendrickson. Is he still on the team? Sam Hubbard probably should move on from Sam, but we'll see what happens in that room. Joseph Osai will be gone. Miles Murphy, he needs to be a big part of this defense. I mean, it's getting a little late right now for the defensive side of the ball. You've got to develop some of these guys. Obviously, they dealt with injuries in the secondary. When you think of guys like Dax Hill, DJ Turner going to be coming back from injuries. We still don't know what Dax Hill's going to be or what he looks like out there. That's a huge part of this year for him. So if Al Golden does get the job as a defensive coordinator, I just truly hope he can develop with these guys, because that's my biggest fear right now. And I think you bring up a really good point when it comes to man coverage, because I think a lot of people, they were, even watching that game last night, how in the world are you leaving Jeremiah Smith open there? Or just, it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense on third down and a huge play in the game. And he was no issue at all for Ohio State.
Blitz didn't get home. You call a blitz like that, has to get home. It didn't get home. And at first, I was fully on board with like you got to double Jeremiah Smith there. And then if you go back and watch him Egbuka in the slot, he literally makes the slot corner fall down. So they were picking that up no matter what. Like you could double Smith, okay, Egbuka just scores on you. Like it did not matter whatever they did besides double and just hope that the other guy doesn't beat you. And then like the Notre Dame pass rush was never getting home. So you probably just without enough time to go somewhere else on that play. So I was with the idea. It's like, no, you can't do that in this situation. I think the blitz has to get home. I think you have to have a check out of it when it looks like Ohio State can pick it up. But I think when I look back at that, I go like, yeah, you double Jeremiah Smith in this situation. Like you run some type of cover one double with him. The slot just wins. The slot makes that corner fall down. There's nothing you can do and I think that's a great example of the talent disparity. Like you could double their best player and their second best player is making your corner fall down with just a route. So that is just the talent disparity that was on display. I think we should talk about the national championship game a little bit.
Yeah.
Talent disparity. That's where I was. Like I think
I'm glad you agree.
I think there's stuff Golden maybe could have done different. Maybe a little less man coverage in that game, but that is who they are. I think that's part of that. That's who they are. Second half kind of held Ohio State. Maybe Ohio State's not putting pedal to the metal in that situation, but did slow them down enough to get back into the game before the Smith catch. Talent disparity is all I thought. That he's missing some of his best players, best pass rushers. I think he was missing a DB. You're missing that. You're missing a bunch of players. Like Aaron Glenn gets grace for the players he was missing and getting the doors blown off him by Washington. I don't understand why you wouldn't do that with Al Golden and Notre Dame, where I think the talent disparity, even considering how many players were missing for Detroit, I think the talent disparity between Washington and Detroit was much smaller than the talent disparity between Notre Dame's defense and Ohio State's offense. Like that difference is ginormous. And I've seen the thing that was like, oh, but he's going to have to deal with even better players than what was at Ohio State. Like, yeah, but he will have better players. Like, what do you mean? Like, everybody in the NFL is the best player that was out there in college. Like, yeah, like he will face better players. It's not like he will have the Notre Dame guys to try to take them down. It's just the talent disparity in the NFL because of the draft, because of free agency, because of the cap is never that big. The Ravens lose to the Raiders. The Bengals lose to the Patriots. Like these games there's no blowouts like college. Like you do not get teams in college. Teams in college, you've got my alma mater, Youngstown State, trying to play against Ohio State. They don't stand a chance. They are an FCS program. That's obviously not what was going on, but the talent disparity even between like the top end teams is different. Where there's no cap, there's no, you can only have so many 5 stars. Ohio State had a much better team than Notre Dame. And that just is what it is. You do the best you can, but in my opinion, maybe you just never give grace to the defensive coordinator. They should always figure out a way. Similar to like the offensive line coach, they should always figure out a way to get that offensive line to perform well, even though it's undrafted free agents for most part. If you think that, fine. But I think you have to think a lot less of Aaron Glenn because of how bad his defense performed against Washington. I think you have to think a lot less of a lot of guys out there because of how their defenses performed when they didn't have the talent. And I don't think you should do that, personally. I think Aaron Glenn's a great defensive coordinator. I think Al Golden's a good defensive coordinator. Where I am on that is just there is like I said with the offensive line, players are what matters the most. You can squeeze the most out of them, and Notre Dame did a heck of a job all season, but you get to the biggest stage, you're missing guys, and there's just nothing you can do about what was going on. So you could try to be the smartest guy in the room on Monday morning or Tuesday morning for the national championship game. Like, I would have doubled Jeremiah Smith. It's like, okay, well, Egbuka would have just scored a touchdown or at least picked up the first down. He made his man defender fall to the ground. So what are you going to do about that? Oh, I would have doubled both. It's like, okay, now there's no pressure. Like there's always like hindsight. You could be the smartest guy in the room. You hold the chalk last. If you know exactly what the Ohio State was going to do, yeah, you could figure out a way to stop it. Like, oh, they ran 99. I would have just doubled the outside with Smith. I would have put guy in the middle of the field against, and I would have had him crash down on Egbuka, and I would have had a double on the other side. Like, yeah, if you know what's coming, but you don't line up and they go like, we're going to run this play. You don't know. So I think it's a ballsy call to call cover 0 in that situation. I don't know if I would have done, but I can't blame them too much for what happened in that game, just because Ohio State just had the players. They just had the players. Like they ran through Oregon too. I've seen the Oregon defensive coordinator get brought up a lot. They were probably trouncing Oregon worse in that playoff game. So is he off the list too? Or did that not matter because it wasn't the national championship? Like, there's such a weird thing with this where it's like if you get your the crap kicked out of you, you can't be a good defensive coordinator or you can't be a good coach. Like it just happens, man. It's football, and when you got a talent disparity, you got a talent disparity. You can't out scheme when the other player is just much better than you.
There's a couple of things. Players need to execute and get it done too when they're out there. Al Golden can't be out there and say, you know what? You can't trip. You can't fall over the guy. You have to get to him.
He's not the one out there falling down.
Exactly. And two, and look, I'd be fine for what I'm hearing about Patrick Graham. He sounds like he would be an awesome hit in development, defensive coordinator too. So I'd be fine if that happens. But I do want to refresh everybody's memory. What did Joe Burrow do to Patrick Graham's defense?
Ran through them like crap through a goose, man. Like,
I mean,
you talk about 41 points there, 36 points given up to the Panthers, 34 to the Broncos, 34 to the Dolphins, 34 to the Chargers, 32 to the Steelers. That's what the Raiders did this season. Like, that's who you wanted instead? I don't know. Like, I think Patrick Graham's a good coach, but if we're just going to look at like, and we're not going to bother, we're going to put blinders on and just say like, you should always be able to stop an offense. Like, well, he didn't. Like, who do you actually want? Like, are you only going to look at guys that never got the crap kicked out of them? Because, I mean, how much you look at the Broncos, and the Broncos, one of the best defenses the entire NFL. And you talk about one of their assistants who I really like the idea of getting Jim Leonard from them. Ravens scored 41 on them. Chargers scored 34 on them. Browns scored 32 on them. Bills scored 31. Bengals scored 30 on them. It's like you can always find like teams score 30. They score 30 plus. It's an offensive league. And when you are down guys, it gets even worse. So there's nobody out there that's the perfect candidate. When you fired Lou, there wasn't, I guess Bill Belichick was sitting out there, but for a head coaching job. Yeah. You don't have a guy out there that you go like, that's the obvious choice. Like, I love Dennis Allen. I think he was, to me, the best coach on the market. Seems like he either had a deal with Ben Johnson. They weren't interested. He wasn't interested, something. But even him, he got the crap kicked out of him on occasion. It's like there's nobody out there that you would go, I thought, like I said, I thought Dennis Allen was the best coach on the market. I wouldn't see him and go like, dude, nobody can even score 25 on this guy. Like, they're free agents for a reason. Like, if you had a defense that nobody could score 30 on, you wouldn't be available. That's just how it is.
And one more thing about the national championship game, we talk about the talent level, and I think you bring up a good point, because that was the thing I was seeing when people were saying, well, it's just a different talent level when you look at the guys on Ohio State's roster versus Notre Dame. Not saying that the guys on Notre Dame's roster won't be in the NFL draft, because they will have plenty of players in the NFL draft. But the comparison was, well, how is he going to stop NFL players on Sunday if he can't stop these? And I will say this about Jeremiah Smith, and I don't feel like this is a hot take at all. If he was draft eligible this year, I wouldn't be surprised. Exactly.
He looks like Julio. He looks like Julio Jones. He's only 19 years old.
Did you see him in the post game? He's like, "Oh, I want to, win 3 more of these," and he's like, "No, I want to win 2 more of these," because I mean, man, he's trying to get out of there in 2 more years. But no, that
he was in high school last year.
I can't believe
a high schooler trying to stop him.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
That's crazy.
He's
Are you mad at SEC? 2019 defensive coordinators because he can't keep up with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Like, that defensive coordinator's got no idea what's going on. It's like, yeah, they do. They just can't stop it. Like, at some point, you just can't stop that level of talent.
And I will say this, because obviously we are not sitting here saying, oh, Al Golden, if he gets the job, or even Patrick Graham, if he gets the job, they're going to come in here and they are going to dominate. They're going to be the best. I hope they are. I hope that happens. But I'm not saying that. Look, the front office, they need to play a huge part in it too. When it comes to free agency, you have to make some tough decisions. You got to cut some of the meat. You got to cut some of these guys who just do not produce for you anymore. Sam Hubbard, Jermaine Pratt. That could be a conversation that you're going to be having soon. I've seen a few of his social media posts, so we'll see what happens when it comes to the defensive decisions. But yes, the front office, they'll still need to be a big part of this, for who they bring in. And obviously they do feel comfortable with Al Golden. He didn't leave on bad terms. He got a great position with Notre Dame. Everybody at Notre Dame loves him. And I'm here for it. I'm here for just a refresh on the defensive side. I'm glad they didn't just stick with it, even though they, finished the season 9-8. So we'll see what happens. It really does feel like Al Golden's going to be coming to town on Wednesday, and they're going to offer him the job, because you got to get the guy ready. You have the Senior Bowl. It's coming right around the corner, just a few weeks away. And there's decisions to be made when it comes to the rest of his staff and what that looks like. So I'm excited to talk about more coaching hires and getting this done before Super Bowl weekend,
Yeah. I think the last thing I'll say, and this is a negative, I hated the process to get to Al Golden. Just seems like they just went Al Golden even before Lou got the notice that he was being let go. They just went like, we'll go with Al. Like that's how you only have 2 defensive coordinator interviews. I'm not saying they need to interview everybody under the sun, but if you could have at least brought in a few more guys and just pick their brains, just talk to them. If you bring in Jim Laird, Steve Klingscale, or Matt Eberflus, or maybe Robert Sala and Dennis Allen didn't want to come. Like maybe that's why they didn't have an interview with those guys. But like, I just think they needed more guys to interview because I don't think that Covington guy from New England was ever a real candidate. Like I think they're interviewing him to maybe be the defensive line coach, to be honest. I think Graham, yes, that was a real candidate. And I think he's a very good interview, apparently. Like he goes as far as possible in every interview. Like he's doing great. So I think that was a real interview. But it's like, have more of those. Have a few more of those. Just like talk to more guys. Like your process shouldn't be, we're going to go with this guy. And before you even get there, like I think that's a terrible process to just have your mind made up before you even get to the next spot. Like the whole point of having that spot open would be to talk to guys and see who could possibly be the best defensive coordinator. And maybe they thought it was Al going in, but to me, scientific method here. Hypothesis, I think Al's going to be the best, but test it. Talk to all these people and see if you just like, maybe Jim Leonard comes in and he's just like blowing you away with what he's talking about. Like, I think that's how that should go. It shouldn't go, okay, we like Al. Al was here before. Let's go with him. And at the end of the day, I think Al is a good defensive coordinator. I think he's a good coach. I would give this like a B. But if the process was better, maybe I'd give it a higher grade. If they brought Al in after bringing in a bunch of other guys and maybe had a second round of interviews, I would feel better about this. But with where it stands, I feel good. I feel like he's going to do a good job. But I also think the process stinks, and they probably could have talked to more people and gotten a better opportunity for this.
100%. One more quick thing on that, but I agree with you. I think, and maybe there were interviews or conversations that happened, they didn't make it out, but I feel like with some of those bigger names, you would have heard it from some of the NFL insiders, and just be open to that. I mean, goodness, like you said, you could have had an interview and been like, you know what, this guy might be it. And you had time because Golden was still in the playoffs, so you really couldn't make anything official there. So he could still be on the back burner if you found another guy that you were really impressed with. So I agree with you. I want them to be open-minded to thinking outside of the box too. I hope if Al is named the defensive coordinator, he works out and it's amazing. And honestly, Al is looking at other opportunities next year because he was so amazing this year, and somebody wants to hire him as a head coach. I hope they're in that situation, but we'll see what it looks like for them. Do you want to mention, and then we could do just a quick prediction for championship weekend, but Cam Grandy, that was extension news today. I know everybody's waiting for the bigger news, but look, Joe Burrow praised him when he had to come in and step up for the Eric All role. Limited snaps as a rookie, but it felt like one that this team did hit outside of the draft, and that was huge for them. They need to continue to do that with only having 6 picks in the 2025 draft. But any thoughts on extending him at all?
I like it. I think he had to do it. He was like an ERFA or something. I should know this stuff, but I don't. I guess it's really cheap to do it. You just basically for nothing. I like it a lot, though. He's a guy that can block his tail off. Like that is maybe a future Drew Sample replacement. I'm also not opposed to having 2 tight ends on the roster week 1 that can block like that. I think that's important to be able to run some of the stuff they run, because I don't think Gesicki's lining up in a 3-point stance next year if he's here. I don't think that Tanner Hudson would either, really. So you need guys that can line up in a 3-point stance and block like a tackle. That's part of the job of being a tight end. I get it. He's not some dynamic receiver, but I thought he was really impressive when he wasn't false starting, when he was out there and blocking. I think that's why he kept earning more and more snaps. So I like this. It's probably really cheap, I would assume, based on the ERFA, whatever, exclusive rights free agency. I like it a lot. I understand it's not an exciting one, but to me, this is a guy I would have liked to bring back. And I get people are going to be like, Tanner McLaughlin, from what I've read, barely saw him on the field. Saw him in the preseason, I guess. Yeah. He's a receiver. He's really a receiver. So they're not doing the same role. If this was a blocking tight end they drafted, whatever. But Cam Grandy earned his way into playing snaps. Maybe McLaughlin could do that next year. Maybe he can't. He was a 6th round pick. I'm not losing sleep over that. Because Grandy, to me, as a UDFA, is already producing at what I would expect a 6 or above what a 6th-round pick would produce. So I think he gets on the field, he does a good job. Yeah, like it a lot. Like blocking tight ends. I think they're necessary. Not always a fan favorite, but to me, a guy that's necessary for some of the stuff you want to run on offense.
Get some more of these extensions rolling. We're ready. We're ready.
Yeah.
So we'll see if there's any more.
Good appetizer.
Hey, they got a big one they have to make with one wide receiver before March hits. So we'll see what that looks like for them. But should be a big week for the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think they're done when it comes to news. But one really quick question, Mike. NFC, I feel like they're carrying the playoffs right now when it comes to these close, insane games. Who are you taking for championship weekend? NFC, AFC, you can do it really quick.
Okay, rooting for the commies. I think the Eagles win. To me, Commanders, that is who I want to win the whole thing. I don't care about this offseason. Oh, but they'll put Jaden Daniels above Joe Burrow. I don't care.
I do not. Jaden Daniels is insane, and he's
so cool. He's so cool. I love watching him. He does his VR thing. He's watching the game at 1.75 speed like that. He's such a cool player. I'm rooting for him. I want to see more of him. I'd rather see him than Jalen Hurts. I can tell you that. Eagles got a much better team, but I am rooting for the Commanders. I will say I think the Eagles win. And the other side, I think the Chiefs win. I'm rooting for the Bills. I'm rooting for the losers. I think the Chiefs win. I think the Chiefs win the whole Super Bowl, if that's what you want. They've done it twice in a row. They do it every year. We come to this conclusion. It's like, but they didn't have a great regular season. They didn't have a great regular season last year. Didn't matter. Who cares? They actually didn't look that great against Houston, but they won. And until I see them lose, I'm just going to keep predicting them to win. So Chiefs win the whole thing. I think they beat the Bills. I am rooting for a Commanders-Bills Super Bowl. I see some people say that sounds like stupid. I think that'd be an exciting game. I think that is a fun game. I understand there's no, but what about the legacies, the storylines? Don't care. Want to see good football. Want to see players I like watching. I like watching Josh Allen. I love watching Jaden Daniels. Hope that's the game. I don't love watching Patrick Mahomes at this point. I think he's a phenomenal talent. I think he's the best quarterback in the entire world, but I did not like watching him against Houston. He's not as exciting as he used to be. And then the flopping thing is crazy. And the other side, the Eagles, love watching Barkley. I don't care for watching Jalen Hurts. I feel like he lost a step. He's not as dynamic as he used to be. He's running the offense. I can't say he's a bad quarterback or anything like that. I think he's a good quarterback. I just don't think he's as dynamic or exciting as he used to be. I think Barkley's awesome to watch, but I'm rooting for the Commanders to win the whole thing. I think it'll be Eagles-Chiefs again, and I think the Chiefs win again. What do you think?
Okay, I'll go really quick. I agree with you when it comes to Jaden Daniels. He is so fun. I was talking to a Commanders fan the other day because those are people who've been day ones. You don't just decide you're going to be a Commanders fan. I think over the last few years, I think you are the ones who've been there through the struggles, through the good and the bad, and they've obviously had a lot of changes, and I'm just pumped for them. I said, as soon as you get your franchise guy, everything feels so much better. And you guys are playing with house money right now. You're in the NFC Championship game. Jaden's playing his face off as the underdog several times this year. Honestly, you can go back to week 3 in Cincinnati on Monday Night Football. Wish he would have lost that game because it was against the Bengals, but he's phenomenal. He's awesome. I think it'll continue for him. I don't think they'll win, but obviously he'll be fun for years to come. I'll take Jalen Hurts and the Eagles just because of the talent. And honestly, Barkley, we talk about other guys I'm rooting for. It's Barkley. Saquon, he's such a likable guy, and he's insane this year. I would love to see him go to the Super Bowl and win it all. Just a great ending for him, or great story for him, honestly, from Giants to Eagles. So I'll go Eagles just because of the talent on both sides of the ball. And then on the AFC, I got to go with you on this. Would I be surprised if the Bills won? No, I think they're actually favorites to win right now, but it's just the way Kansas City has been playing over the last few weeks. Agree with you when it comes to Patrick Mahomes. I haven't been impressed with him, honestly, all season long, but he finds a way to win the game. And yeah, the flopping is so annoying. It was so good. It was actually a little refreshing for the timeline to see it and call it out, even the broadcasters, but I think they find a way to get back. It's just what they do. And their buddy Ron Torbert will be there to welcome them in the Super Bowl. So, yeah, Bills, they're finally getting back to the AFC Championship game after 4 years. Fantastic game against the Ravens. Honestly, if you're Baltimore, you are sick to your stomach. You had 3 turnovers in that game, and you still had a chance to almost win it again, and failed to do so. So playoffs have been they've been better. Divisional round was better. But yeah,
division round's awesome. That was the best round of football we've seen. There was one bad game. Everything else was pretty good.
Yeah. So Yeah, Chiefs probably gonna win it all, but
Probably.
probably. But you know what? The only thing I will say,
Go commies.
that too. If only Joe Burrow was there to stop it. Only
Yeah,
Joe Burrow. You know, but it was funny, and I'll end after this because we're actually going extremely long. I remember after the Super Bowl last year, all of the tweets as soon as that game ended, Joe Burrow, save us from this. But hey, maybe Josh Allen gets it done, and we see the Commanders and the Buffalo Bills. What a game that would be, and how exciting for a lot of people. But we'll see. To be determined. Big weekend, AFC Championship, NFC Championship weekend. Make sure you check out Mike's work. I saw a few of your McKinley Jackson clips. Feel like that piece is coming soon.
It's coming. I'm finally healthy. It's coming.
It's coming. Make sure you check it out. Make sure you check out Mike's work. A lot of good clips on Scott Peters, the new Bengals offensive line coach. And thank you for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.